Hi everyone, Daljeet Peterson here from astrolab21.com. And in this video, we're going to be talking about Aries season 2021. So what's going on with the astrological weather? What's going on here as we move into Aries season? We're just finishing up Pisces season. And this is a really significant time of the year for those of us who follow astrology, because really the beginning of Aries season is the beginning of the astrological new year. We are ending Pisces, which is the last sign of the zodiac, and entering into Aries, which is the first sign of the zodiac. So for us astrologers, this is the new year. And, we follow that seasonal calendar. And, if you think about it, it's really the new year for the entire planet. If we look at what's going on in the environment, in our biosphere, well, spring is certainly in the air. We can see it in the trees that are starting to bud. We are seeing it in the activity of the birds who are starting to build their nests in preparation for the birth of the new chicks that are coming, right? And that's what Aries is all about. Aries is all about birthing the new. It's beginnings, it's initiations, it's starting something new. That's Aries. And that's why it is the sign on the spring equinox, right? The spring equinox is the first day of the astrological new year. And a very significant time. The ancients really took the solstices and the equinoxes really seriously. They literally set their clocks, set their calendars to these very significant, what we call the cardinal points of the solar year, right? So on the first day of spring and the first day of fall, the equinoxes, the days are of equal length. Those 2 days a year where we have exactly the same time of day and night, as opposed to the solstices where you have the summer solstice where you have the longest day, and you have the winter solstice where you have the longest night. So Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, those are the 4 cardinal points, and we orientate ourselves and our solar year to those points. Different than the calendar year, that Gregorian calendar that we all follow, where we celebrate the new year in January. Really, the true new year, if you will, if you allow me that, is tomorrow, is March 20th, 2021, on Saturday, when the sun moves into the sign of Aries. And we're going to look at the chart, and we'll talk about some of the configurations that we can expect for the month. But before I move over there, just want to talk about the archetype of Aries in general, this process of moving from what we just finished up, Pisces season, where we've just had a month of the sun moving through the sign of Pisces, a water sign, a mutable sign, a sign that's ruled by Neptune. Traditionally, the time of year where we really are called to go inward, to really self-reflect on the year that was, right? Pisces is all about endings, which is why it's the last sign of the zodiac and represents the end of the seasonal year, the solar year, right? So we reflect on the year that was, we bring closure, and we make plans for the new year to come. Well, now that new year is upon us. The sun moves into Aries. Now we go from water to fire. We go from mutable to cardinal, right? So all of a sudden we have this new energy. And that's what we're seeing in the natural world. That energy we're being triggered on a cellular level. We are humans after all. We are still biological creatures, and we are connected to the resonant energy of our biosphere, of this planetary energy pattern that we all are living in. We are embedded into this energy system. So when the birds start getting active around us, and all the animals and critters and the trees start to bloom, and we plant the seeds, there's just this energy for initiating new projects, right? We want to go out and get our gardens started. We spring clean. We clean out the closets, and you clean out the garage to make room for the new season to begin. So that's what we're all experiencing, and we're going to experience over the course of this month, which is Aries season 2021. Now, of course, we have to consider this particular Aries season against the backdrop of the year that we've experienced, this COVID-19 induced global pandemic, and the lockdown and the shelter in place and the limits on our movements, the limits on our freedom, all things quite antithetical, right, to the Aries archetype. Aries is all about freedom. Aries, like we said, wants to get out in the world and just do and be and explore and express. Fire, right? And it's that cardinal fire, right? It is expressive. It moves from the center outward. It is the most active, probably, of all the fire signs. It's also the least self-conscious of the fire signs. It's this unconscious, unbridled energy. It doesn't even think about what it wants to do. It acts first. Aries always acts first and thinks about it later, which is why it's often associated with being a little headstrong and can get itself into some tricky problems because it acted before it thought. And that's a classic Aries quality to have. So as we approach Aries season, we come into this springtime, we are all ready to get out there. And that's really exacerbated by the fact that we've suffered not just the normal winter season, and for those of us in the northern latitudes who really have to experience a long winter, you get that cabin fever, you get spring fever, and this time of year comes around and the air starts to change and the light starts to change and we spring the clocks forward and boy, we are ready to get out in the world. Well, it's like we've had a year-long winter with this shelter in place and lockdown and social distancing and mask wearing, and it's been really restrictive. We've lived under a year of restrictive measures that have really probably tried our patience to the maximum. And Aries is a very impatient sign. And I think we had a lot of patience over the last month. I think Pisces and the configuration we had really gave us the ability to really wait it out. We've been waiting for these vaccines to ripple through the community. And that's starting to happen. We saw that begin in Aquarius season, the scientific innovation. Now we've had this sort of patience to really do what's right for the collective, Pisces. But as we move here into Aries season, I think a lot of us are going to feel like enough is enough and we are done with all of this. I want to get my life back. I want to be outdoors. I want to engage and interact with my friends and my family. I want to kiss my grandchildren and I want to hug my siblings. And, you're not alone. We all are feeling that. And that's being exacerbated by our move into Aries season 2021. So just be forewarned that this month you may find this sense of very impulsive urges in yourself, a very selfish at times because we're not really thinking, it's this unconscious selfishness because we are feeling this urge to really get back out into the world and get our lives kick-started again. So this could cause, Mars rules Aries. So Mars is known as being a little aggressive. It can be combative at times. So we can expect the opportunity or possibility for some combative verbal language within our lives, within our relationships and our communities. Some actual physical violence, just because that energy is has been so pent up for so long and it is ready to really burst at the seams. So just be aware of that. One of my favorite metaphors for the idea of Aries is the notion of the spiritual warrior, right? The real challenge of the archetype of Aries is yes, there's all this incredible energy, but how do we contain it and how do we channel it so that it is proactive and not destructive, right? That's really the challenge of Aries and of Aries season. Those of us who have Sun in Aries, Aries rising, or even Aries moon, something we all know too well, and something we all probably grapple with. I'm an Aries moon, so I do have a good sense of the archetype and the challenges that it presents, the positive and the negative, like we always talk about, right? All of these archetypes have their light and their shadow side, and we are always being pulled to navigate. We want to move towards the light. We can't ignore the shadow of anything, because that's where the lessons are, and that's where the evolution comes. That's where the growth comes. There is no light without shadow. We always have to keep that in mind. So as we navigate Aries season, let's try to be patient in the face of a very impatient and impulsive desire, and the calling of nature and the world to get us out there. I think it's happening. I think as this month progresses, we're going to get an opening up. I live here in California. We're moving into I guess it's the red zone. I thought that was for football, but apparently it's also for our COVID restrictions. But things are starting to loosen up. Hopefully we're getting back to a degree of normalcy, but hopefully we'll all be collectively birthing a new normal. And it's just a great language to use. The idea of birthing something is definitely in keeping with the idea of Aries, the archetype of Aries season. So I want to pull up the chart here real quick, and we can talk through what we're going to see, what we're going to expect. As we can see right here, what we're talking about, we have the sun, 0 degrees Aries. So after spending that entire year going through every sign, it goes through one sign every month, 12 signs of the zodiac. It now has come back to that 0 degree point, 0 degrees Aries. This is the start. This is why we talk about it being the astrological new year. This is the time of new beginnings. And of course, it's interesting. Like I said, we started Aries season 2020 in a much different place. And if I were to take our calendar and our zodiac here back 1 year, if we go back to March 20th, 2020, when the sun moved into Aries, as it does every time at this time of year on the spring equinox, well, what an entirely different world we were in, right? We had this massive stellium going on in Capricorn, anchored by Pluto in Capricorn, but we had Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn all in conjunction with Pluto, the Lord of the Underworld. And this was the heavy configuration that really was the signature of 2020. This is what imploded on us. This is what brought the world to its knees. This was the configuration that we as astrologers had been looking forward to, as I've said in many videos, with a good degree of trepidation, because this configuration really implied something heavy was coming our way in 2020. And it didn't fail to deliver on that promise, did it? I mean, the world literally was brought to its knees by this pandemic. And so Capricorn, right? Structure, society, authority, like everything was put to the limits, was challenged. And that's what Pluto's doing. Pluto came into Capricorn back in 2008, right with the financial crisis, and it said, hey, we've got some problems here on a big picture society structural level, and we've got to make some major changes here. And if you don't change it, I will. That's the message that Pluto delivers to us. And regardless of whether the astrophysicists have demoted Pluto to being a dwarf planet or a TNO, a trans-Neptunian object, Pluto is impervious to our name calling, right? It won't be belittled. It's still out there orbiting. It's still exerting its influence, and it's still carrying its archetypal message of transformation. And if you don't think astrology has some validity, if you look at this configuration and you look at 2020 and you don't see it, well, I can't help you. You're probably not watching this video anyway, so it doesn't matter. But you can just see how, okay, this began a year-long winter a year long of cabin fever, and it started at Aries season 2020. And so just as we were all ready to collectively experience that rite of spring, we got the brakes put on us. And it was very new and weird and strange, and we didn't know what we were dealing with a year ago. And we spent an entire year dealing with it, right? If we look at, that energy did shift. And I think if we move ahead from, March, from the spring, and if we go to the winter solstice, we get to December 20th here, what happened? Another very significant event took place then, where we had the great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn at 0 degrees of Aquarius, right? So this signaled a very new era beginning, this Aquarian era. It's the start of a 20-year cycle. But what we have to keep in mind here is that, those two planets were heavily impacted by their experience of dealing with Pluto here in Capricorn. That conjunction, it was a reckoning. Whenever you have a conjunction with Pluto, which is the furthest planet, so it's the heavier entity. Both Saturn and Jupiter had a reckoning with Pluto in Capricorn, and Pluto said, "Hey, shit's got to change, and if you guys aren't going to help me change it, I'm gonna blow it up, and you're going to have to deal with putting the pieces back together." And I really think that Saturn and Jupiter got that message. They got that Capricorn message, and they're bringing it into harmony. They aligned in Aquarius, a very significant alignment. I think a lot of us will point to that as a turning point. We won't know for another 10 or 20 years really the significance of what's happening right now. It's kind of how history works. We're living through history. We're creating history. But I think you're going to see something very significant develop. And now, since then, since the end of last year, we've had things moving forward. And so we were initiated with this, we had the crucible of Capricorn. We initiated into Aquarius, and over the course of that month, we've seen, I went by a year, not a month, sorry. Over the course of the month from January into February, we had an incredibly intense Aquarian experience. We had the election, we had the insurrection, we had a lot of craziness go on. And then, last month, I think with, I want to bring you up to the new moon we just had in Pisces was really significant. It was a much quieter time, right? After that intensity of 2020, the intensity of January and February with that Aquarius energy, you can see things started to open up a little bit. But this was a really big configuration here, this stellium we had in Pisces just last week. This Pisces new moon, we had Sun, Moon, and Venus and Neptune all conjunct. And you think about Venus and Neptune, right? The two great benefics. This was really a time, this was a new moon, and I said it in my last video about Pisces season, for really setting intention for some deep soul work. And I don't know how you guys experienced it. If you had it, I really felt it. Certainly my own personal spiritual practice, my sadhana that I do every morning, which involves yoga and meditation. But I've really been having these kind of conversations with my soul. Of course, for me, I'm a Sag rising, so Pisces falls in my 4th house of the self, the seat of the self. And so I've really been having this dialogue between my ego self and my soul self. Who am I? Who am I really? And trying to find ways of letting that deeper soul identity have voice, have expression, have purpose, become part of the conversation and the dialogue. And this really intense Pisces new moon, I think, was really supportive of that kind of deep soul work, looking for closure, looking at this last year and going, okay, this was a difficult year. What were the lessons? What do I want to leave behind? We talked about dropping the baggage so that we can move forward into the new year. cleaner and unburdened and unbridled, right? And so that's what we're experiencing now. So now we're moving forward into Aries season. So, but that this lunation is overlapping. So this move from Pisces season into Aries season is overlapped by the lunar cycle of the new moon in Pisces that we had during Pisces season and the full moon in Libra that we're going to have here in Aries season. And I want to look at that because I think that's going to be the most significant period of this entire Aries season. But just generally, if we look at just as we start Aries season here, I have it up for March 20th at about 3 o'clock in the morning here in California is when we will get the sun moving to 0 degrees, 0 minutes of Aries. And, we can see that we have the ongoing square that we will talk about a lot over the course of the year between Saturn and Uranus continues to go on. That will be in the background of the entire year. And we'll talk more about that as the year progresses for sure. We can also see that Saturn now is coming into a nice air trine with Mars over here in Gemini, joined by the moon right now and the North Node as we enter into this season. So I don't know if you noticed, when we had Mars back here in Taurus over the last month or 6 weeks or so, it was in square with Saturn. And then I don't know, I was really feeling that square energy between Mars and Saturn. A lot of very motivating energy, very practical, get it done, a lot of just energy to do things, to do work. As now Mars has now made its move into Gemini and come into this trine relationship, I think we're all feeling a little bit of that pressure off. The need to really do has been transmuted a little bit. I think it's a time really to be thinking about what we're going to do. It's actions through thought, actions through planning. An action plan is really a good, appropriate use of this configuration. Gemini, Mars and Gemini, right? The new ideas, the new learning that we want to do, initiating things that are going to expose us to new people, new ideas, new situations, a change of our energy, a change in the way we think, supported by Saturn in another air sign in Aquarius, the structure, changing in the structure of our lives. And we talked about this a lot in some of the previous videos about Aquarius season and about the Great Conjunction. But now we're that it's continuing to unfold. This is what astrology is showing us, right? The unfolding patterns. And we have to keep working with these energies as they continue to shift throughout the year, throughout the zodiac, and throughout our lives. So I think it's a rather nice start to this Aries season. Not a lot of intensity. We're getting a chance to ease into it. But I want to move forward to a week from the beginning. If we get into, let's go another day or so here. I want to get to 8 degrees. That's one day too many. I'm going to go a few hours here. If we go to March 28th, which is going to be when we're going to have the full moon, and I want to draw your attention to something very interesting that's going to be happening. We're going to get this triple conjunction of the Sun, Venus, and Chiron at 8 degrees of Aries. So what's going on with this? And concurrently, we're going to see that they are all in opposition to our full moon coming over here in Libra. So this is why I say I think this is the big event of Aries season 2021 so that we want to be prepared for, because there's a real opportunity here for healing. And why do I say that? Well, we have to talk about Chiron. Chiron as an archetype is known as the wounded healer. And wherever Chiron appears in our own personal birth chart, it tends to be where we are wounded, where we carry some deep wounding, whether from this lifetime, whether from past lifetimes. It has this karmic sense to it. And so we all have it somewhere. We all have a wound that we carry. And we all are somewhat wounded. Most of us suffered some sort of wounding in childhood. It's just part of the rite of passage. Our childhood world is filled with this sort of fantasy, right? As we're discovering ourselves and formulating our personalities, it's just this unlimited magical space, right? We remember childhood so fondly. That's why we all love childhood, and the ideas of childhood and movies about childhood have a enduring fascination for all of us. But of course, we all are being groomed by our parents and by authority figures to become part of this society that they are raising us to become part of. And invariably, we encounter the limits, right? The parental limits. There's some authority that puts the kibosh on our childhood dreams and fantasies. And sometimes that can be quite traumatic, right? We can carry a lot of guilt and shame over being punished for things that we did as 3-year-olds or 6-year-olds or 10-year-olds. And we carry that with us throughout our whole lives. It's interesting how often we will make decisions as adults based on decisions that we made as children, and continue to make decisions based on those emotional experiences that we had that we perceived as a wound, as a trauma. And we all have this. Some of us have it, from well-intentioned parents. And I'm not blaming parents for screwing up our lives, but this is just part of the natural cycle of things. But our authority figures, religious figures, if we were brought up and raised in a highly or strictly religious family environment. And then, of course, there's those of us who had suffered, real physical, emotional, or sexual abuse as children. And sadly, there's a lot of people who had, unfortunately, suffered those experiences. And we carry those with us certainly through into our adult lives as well. And it can be really debilitating. It affects our ability to function fully as adults. It affects our ability to have lasting and meaningful relationships in our lives. These old traumas can really hold us back, really block us. And that's what, coming out of Pisces season is all about. The past is the old wounds that we do want to address. So what we showed and talked about with that new moon in Pisces culminates in this full moon in Libra. And so there's this incredible opportunity with this Chiron configuration to really go in and do some deep introspective work about what are the wounds that we are carrying. Where have we been wounded? And how do we begin the process of healing those wounds? Chiron, Sun, and Aries. And Chiron and Aries in general, to me, it symbolizes that innocence lost. What was that event or that time when we felt like our innocence was taken from us? And we lament that loss. And we've been maybe making some bad decisions in our lives in compensation for that loss. But we are being called this particular time to really do that deep work. And because it's in Aries, it's something we do as individuals. It's a solo mission. We are being called to go deep in, to do that self-reflection, that self-analysis, and to really try to heal that wound, to look at it, to examine it, to not be afraid, to have the courage, Aries, right? The courage to look at it unflinchingly, and to forgive and forget. It would be a good way of approaching some of these old traumas that we're having to work through. Now, we also have Venus there with us, which is really helpful. I think without that, this would be a much more difficult configuration. It would be super challenging. But I think Venus is going to give us a little bit of that. It's going to smooth the edges a little bit. will allow us to look at these issues with a lot more self-love and self-care, and really see how beneficial and helpful dealing with these old traumas can be. So, and Venus in Aries is going to demand some things of her own, right? She's going to insist upon getting some of that connection, the relationship energy. It wants to share. It wants to connect with others. So it's an interesting dichotomy here. Aries being more individualistic, independent, solo. Venus wanting us to be more connected and partnering. And here's where we bring in the full moon in Libra, ruled by Venus, right? And the Libra energy of partnering, companions, harmony, balance. So this is going to be a very interesting time where we're doing this deep introspective work and being compelled to share that process, right? So our intimate relationships, our significant others, our close personal friends, our nearest and dearest family and friends. We're going to be compelled, and we're going to have an opportunity to maybe share some of our trauma and to bring some of that to the surface. And maybe it's trauma that that came up with the relationship, or maybe it's trauma that is preventing our relationships from continuing to grow and evolve. Maybe we're playing out some of these karmic patterns in our relationships, and it's stunting our growth. Well, here's a real opportunity to bring some of that to the surface in a very kind, gentle, and loving way. This is really a unique opportunity here being presented by this configuration that I hope we can all take advantage of. So, not only are you going to get a chance to share your process with your partners are going to share their process with you and feel that compulsion to do that. And so we have to both be communicative and expressive of our own experience, and we have to have that capacity to deeply listen to the other. That's a very Venusian quality and a very Libran quality. So we're getting this, this is a real, I really think, time will tell. Let's see what this month presents for us all. But, this is what astrology does really well, is it prepares us for what the opportunities that are being presented. Okay, so, and again, we got light and shadow. These, and why I love astrology is that it is alerting me to this configuration. It's making me aware of it. Okay, I'm going to do this process. I'm going to do the work, and maybe share that process with my partner, and listen and be listening for her to be bringing up some of these things for herself, and taking that opportunity. Now, the shadow side of all this could equally easily present itself. These deep wounds come up, this Chiron, we feel the wound to our emotions, to our relationships, and sun goes and shines a light on it, and it just hurts. And it's like, slowly peeling the Band-Aid off rather than ripping it off. Which experience do you want to have? And I want to just bring this all into, this symbol of Chiron. It's called the wounded healer. And so there's three aspects to Chiron. There's the wounded, there's the wounder, there's the healer, right? So as I've established, we all have a wound. We've all been wounded. Pain and suffering, it's just a part of life. We all probably suffered something in childhood or throughout even in our adult lives that's been painful, that we've had to deal with. And we tend to just suppress it and push it down into the unconscious. And it just erupts in very disturbing behaviors often, right? So we're all wounded. Chiron gives us the option. How do we respond to that wound? One option is we become the wounder, right? Whatever was done to us, we do to others. Then we see this, unfortunately, it's as a pattern that repeats in families, with domestic and physical abuse, with emotional abuse, sexual abuse. Often the abused becomes the abuser. And that's all tied to this Chironic archetype. The other option that Chiron gives us is to become, rather than become the abuser, we become the healer. Because we have been wounded, and because we know what that feels like. We know how hard that is. But because we've done the work to heal it within ourselves, that can give us the capacity and the compassion to help and to heal others. So that's a real opportunity that's being presented for us in this month, in this Aries season. So I hope you all have the opportunity to do some of that work and to share that work with the other people in your lives. I hope that we all get an opportunity to experience our rite of spring, as is our seasonal rite, our birthright, to have these opportunities every year during Aries season, to get out there, to really be enthusiastic, to initiate new projects, and to experience the rebirth, the seasonal rebirth that is the springtime and is the annual new year. So I hope that's going to be helpful for you. I hope there's something that you guys can glean and take away from all of this. As always, if you do find these videos helpful, I would appreciate it if you would like and subscribe to the channel. I am really trying to grow this as a real community here at Astrolab 21. I want us all to learn to use astrology together, to talk about it. I'm going to be introducing a new series. I'm hoping to do the first one tomorrow. It feels like Aries season and the 0 degrees Aries will be a good time to initiate something new. It's something I've been toying with. It's going to be called Mutable Fire. And it's going to allow me to talk a little bit more personally about my own use of astrology. But hopefully I can use that to create a lot of teachable moments, as I'm trying to figure out what I want to do with the channel. I talked about wanting to create this blueprint of the soul, which is my sort of astrology 101. I've been working on some of that. It's a lot more labor intensive than I expected. So I'm not able to roll that out as quickly and get you guys videos on that. So I'm hoping I can use this other method to use and access some of that information, and just to get more videos out with higher frequency that I hope will be really helpful to you guys out there. So in addition to subscribing, hopefully hit the notification button as well, so that you'll get alerted when I do release these new videos, and you'll stay up to date with everything I'm doing on the channel. All right, well, that's going to do it for this edition. I hope you guys all have a happy and healthy and safe and enjoyable and exuberant Aries season 2021. Okay, until next time. Sat Nam, everyone.